Continuing on with Chapter 11, so we're finishing with page 288. Again, we can use chemicals to control some invasive species. All right, and then we go on and we have climate change as an example also of ways that species can become endangered or extinct. And this is new in the past couple of decades. We'll learn more about this later on this year. All right, so amphibians around the world are declining, and this is pretty serious. Make sure that when you're studying, you understand that amphibians are facing huge declines around the world from pollution, from drought, climate change, and then we also don't know all the answers as to why. Going on to page 290, the benefits of biodiversity. So this bulleted list here, and then also on the next page, are ecosystem services from biodiversity. Make sure you can write about 3 to 4 of these. Remember, ecosystem services benefits humans with money or survival. Okay. Also on page 290, you need to know that high biodiversity increases the stability and resilience of an ecosystem, and the ecosystem can recover better from change. So if you have a drought, if you have a hurricane, if you have fires, if you have diseases, anything like that that comes through an ecosystem, more biodiversity increases the stability and resilience so it can resist change, or it can go through succession and recover better. One of the problems we have now is that because we buy our seeds kind of all from the same company, or we've bred our livestock for certain traits, we have bred out genetic diversity in our crops because we wanted certain traits, but then that decreases the overall genetic diversity. And so that is a concern. You learned about that in a previous chapter with the seed bank to try and preserve genetic diversity of plants. But it also is the case with our livestock, so cattle, pigs, chickens, etc. On page 291, let's talk about biological indicators. So biological indicators indicate whether an ecosystem is in good shape or degraded. So one good example of an indicator species is birds. Because birds are mostly generalists. I mean, there's a few specialists like owls, but for the most part, birds are generalists. And if they disappear from an area, you know there's a problem. So if the birds disappear, something is happening. And we might not see it yet, but we can go, oh, why are the birds gone? What's going on? And then we can check for pollution. We can check for illegal dumping, or air pollution even, or water pollution, or land pollution, or maybe they aren't getting a water source for some reason because somebody's diverted the water away from an ecosystem. So birds are a good indicator species. Amphibians are too. So amphibians are declining worldwide, and that's a problem because they do indicate problems with the species. So because they live in both land and water, and they absorb water through the skin, that makes them extra sensitive to pollution and other environmental stressors. So if your amphibian's disappearing from an ecosystem, it could be a big indicator of water pollution, or hotter temperatures, or things like that that can make them disappear. All right, we're going to go over a couple of pages to page 296. So some ways to protect species includes laws. So the provisions of the Endangered Species Act means you can't destroy endangered species, so you can't go out and kill an endangered species. You also can't destroy their habitats. So let's say you have the spotted owls endangered. Well, you can't cut down the trees. You might not kill the birds directly, but if you cut down their trees, then they have no place to live. That is killing them indirectly. You cannot trade in endangered species parts, so you can't trade elephant tusks. Now, this is an American law, the Endangered Species Act, but so we have elephants live in Africa, but there are some species here that are valued for their parts, like bear gallbladders is part of Asian Chinese medicine, and so it doesn't do anything medicinally, and so people will illegally hunt it because it's worth a lot in Chinese medicine. So you can't trade. If you buy or sell a bear gallbladder, that is a problem. It also includes an amendment that allows property owners to modify the habitat for conservation. So let's say you own a piece of land that happens to have an endangered species on it. So what do? You can craft a deal legally where you can build on part of the land and preserve part of the land too. That's what they do around here in Santa Clarita. The Newhall Ranch project is supposed to have thousands of homes built along the Santa Clara River over off the 126 and by Magic Mountain. So it took a decade or more of legal compromises where they set part of that land aside that they wanted to build houses on, but endangered species like the endangered western toad and a bunch of other birds, they set aside part of that land to conserve, and then the rest they were allowed to build on. And so we do allow that in the United States. There is opposition to the Endangered Species Act, and so as you're reading, just go ahead and read a little bit of the opposition. In our class, we have to know the positives and negatives and who opposes it and why. That's very important. On page 297, know about CITES, which is an international ban of trading or killing species that are endangered. So, for example, under this treaty, it's illegal to trade ivory because they're made out of elephant tusks. So if you are in the U.S. and you trade ivory and you buy or sell it without a permit, you are violating the law and can be prosecuted. And it's this treaty here, CITES. Know the definition of, or know what the Convention on Biological Diversity does, and know what captive breeding programs are. And you can see that here, some captive breeding programs, and then reestablishing them in the wild is one solution to help endangered species. On page 298, there's some opposition to wolf reintroduction. We talked about wolf reintroduction in an earlier chapter. And then another way we can help species now is through DNA forensics. So, for example, if you are selling whale meat illegally, because it's illegal to hunt whales, international treaties, but let's say in some markets in other countries, people are selling things that they are calling something else, but it's really whale meat. They can take a sample of that and check the DNA and see, is it truly a fish or is it truly whale? They can check the DNA for African protected species and see if somebody's selling that meat instead of something that's legal to sell, like pig or cattle. Understand that parks and protected areas conserve biodiversity. So our national parks, our state parks, our county parks. In Santa Clarita, we have Placerita Nature Center, which is a county park that protects ecosystems. It's a very important way to protect ecosystems. On page 299, there's some definitions here. Forensics help us with DNA again. Umbrella species, flagship species, ecological hotspot, which we are in Southern California, and ecological restoration. So know the definitions of all of these things. On page 300 is the story of how we use forensics to uncover illegal whaling. I'm not going to have you sticky note it, but it's a good thing to read and understand what they're doing as a solution. And here is a market showing that, they're going to check and make sure it's not illegal meat. And that's it for chapter 11.